You really thought all those extra hours and the vendor deals you negotiated would buy you a permanent seat at the table? That's not how this company works anymore. Effective immediately, your name is off the attendee list for the Desert Vista Summit. We need stability up there, not someone who asks too many questions about things that don't concern her. Hi, my name is Avery Klein. I am 30 years old.
I sat in my cubicle on the third floor of our Scottsdale headquarters, staring at the email Diane Langford had just forwarded. The subject line was blank. The body contained only 2 lines, the same 2 sentences she had spoken to me in her office 20 minutes earlier. My hands stayed flat on the desk. I didn't type a reply. I didn't call anyone. I just read the words again and felt the floor tilt under my chair.
The Desert Vista compound sits 40 minutes outside the city, tucked into the Red Rock Hills, where the wealthy go when they want to pretend the desert is their private playground. Our company had booked the entire property for the first time. 3 days of strategy sessions, team-building hikes, and evening dinners under the stars. I had spent the last 4 months building the entire thing from nothing. I found the compound, negotiated the group rate, locked in the caterer who could handle dietary restrictions without drama, arranged the shuttle schedule so no one would be stranded on those winding roads, and even secured a last-minute upgrade on the meeting rooms when the original ones tested with bad acoustics. Every vendor contract had my name as the primary contact. Every confirmation email sat in my inbox.
Diane had smiled through the monthly planning meetings and told the leadership team how the operations team is handling the heavy lifting. She never said my name out loud. I didn't mind at first. I liked the work. I liked solving problems before anyone else noticed they existed. That was before Brandon Hale started sitting in on those same meetings.
Brandon had joined the company 2 years after me. I trained him on the vendor portal. I showed him how to read a contract so the company didn't get hit with surprise fees. We used to grab coffee after late nights when a project ran long. He called me his work big sister once, laughing. I didn't correct him. Now he sat beside Diane in every summit planning call, nodding when she spoke, and offering suggestions that sounded a lot like ideas I had already floated weeks earlier.
2 weeks before the exclusion email, I noticed the first shift. Diane asked me to step back from the final vendor calls so Brandon can get some visibility. She said it in the same warm tone she used when she asked people to take on extra work without extra pay. I agreed. I still had the contracts. I still had the relationships. I told myself visibility didn't mean control. Then the attendee list for the summit was circulated. My name wasn't on it.
I walked into Diane's office that morning without knocking. She was standing by the window phone in hand, looking out at the parking lot like she was already somewhere else. Brandon sat in the chair across from her desk, legs crossed, scrolling on his tablet. She didn't invite me to sit.
I asked why my name had disappeared from the list I had helped create. Diane gave me that small, pitying smile she used when she was about to deliver bad news she had already decided was for my own good. That was when she said the 2 lines that ended everything.
I left her office without another word. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I walked back to my desk, opened my laptop, and started forwarding every vendor contract and confirmation to my personal email. I didn't know what I was going to do with them yet. I just knew I wasn't leaving them behind for someone else to claim.
Have you ever poured months of your life into something, only to watch the people who barely touched it decide you don't belong in the room when it finally happens? If that's ever been you, you already know the particular kind of quiet rage that sits in your chest and refuses to leave.
I didn't go home early. I stayed until the building emptied. Most nights I was the last one out anyway. Around 7:30, the cleaning crew started on the executive floor. I told myself I was just tying up loose ends on another project. In reality, I was looking for something I didn't even know what until I found it.
The shared printer near the break room had a stack of pages someone had forgotten to collect. The top sheet was a printed email from Brandon to Diane, dated 3 days earlier. The subject line read, "About the summit," and the rest of it. I almost walked past it. Then I saw my name in the preview pane. I took the pages into the empty copy room, closed the door, and read.
Brandon had written that he was worried Avery was getting too close to the numbers. He said she had asked him twice about the catering deposit and the transportation surcharge. He reminded Diane that they had already moved 30% of the summit budget into a separate line item that only the two of them could access. He said if Avery kept digging, she would eventually notice the discrepancy. Then he wrote the sentence that made the floor tilt again.
I know we said we'd keep the personal stuff out of the office, but if she starts asking questions about why I've been staying late with you, everything else falls apart too. We need her off the attendee list before the compound. After that, we can deal with the rest. The email was signed with his name. There was no reply from Diane attached. It looked like he had printed it to show her in person, and then forgotten to pick up the pages.
I stood in the copy room with the paper shaking in my hands. The affair wasn't the surprise. The surprise was how casually they had written about moving company money and then using my exclusion as the first step in covering it up. The second surprise was the date 3 days before Diane had spoken to me. They had planned the conversation in her office. They had rehearsed the lines about stability and unnecessary drama.
I folded the pages, slid them into the inside pocket of my work bag, and walked out of the building without turning off my computer. The security guard at the front desk waved like he always did. I waved back. My face felt numb.
That night I sat in my apartment with every light off, except the one over the kitchen sink. I read the printed email 4 more times. Each time the words felt less like something that had happened to someone else and more like a timer that had already started counting down. The next morning I received 3 messages before I reached my desk.
The first was from Lena Morales, the project coordinator, who used to sit 2 rows over and trade vendor horror stories with me. She wrote that she had been reassigned to Brandon's team for the summit and that she hoped I understood. She didn't say why she hoped I understood. She just hoped.
The second message was from our usual transportation vendor. He said the deposit we had placed for the summit shuttles had been moved to a different account, and he needed confirmation from the new primary contact before he could proceed. The new primary contact was listed as Brandon Hale. The third message was from Marcus Reed, the senior vice president, who rarely emailed anyone below director level. He asked if I had time for a quick call that afternoon. No subject, no explanation.
I sat at my desk and felt the edges of my morning start to fray. 3 messages, 3 different directions. None of them good. I answered Marcus first because his name carried weight I couldn't ignore. He picked up on the second ring. Avery, he said, voice low and even. I saw the attendee list update. I wanted to hear your side before I hear anyone else's.
I told him the truth in short sentences. I had built the summit logistics. I had been removed without explanation. I had the contracts. I had questions about the budget that no one wanted to answer. He was quiet for a moment. Send me the vendor confirmations you still control, he said finally. And Avery, don't forward anything else yet. I need to look at a few things on my end first. He hung up before I could ask what things.
I spent the rest of the morning sending him the files I had moved to my personal account. Every time I hit send, I felt another thread between me and the company loosen. By lunch, the building felt different. People who used to stop by my desk to ask about a vendor or a room block now walked past without making eye contact. The ones who did speak kept their voices light and their questions short, like they were afraid the conversation might turn into something they didn't want to carry.
Brandon came by my cubicle around 2. He leaned on the partition like we were still the people who used to split late-night takeout. "Hey," he said, smiling, the same smile he used when he asked for help on his first big project. "Diane wanted me to check if you still have the master contact list for the compound. We're trying to finalize the welcome packets."
I looked at him for a long second. The printed email was still in my bag. I could have pulled it out and watched his face change. Instead, I opened my desk drawer, took out the single sheet I had printed that morning, the attendee list, with my name crossed off in red, and handed it to him. "Looks like you already have everything you need," I said. He took the paper, his smile slipped for half a second before he caught it. "Appreciate it," he said, and walked away.
That night I sat in my car in the parking garage after everyone else had left. I didn't start the engine. I just sat with the steering wheel under my hands and the printed email on the passenger seat. The desert compound was less than an hour away. In 2 days, the entire leadership team would be there eating food I had chosen and sleeping in rooms I had blocked. They would be doing it without me. And they would be doing it while the people who had pushed me out tried to keep their own secrets from unraveling in the same rooms.
My phone lit up on the console. A text from an unknown number. It was Marcus Reed. "Check your personal email when you get home. And Avery, don't come into the office tomorrow. I'll explain in the morning." I read the message twice. Then I started the car and drove toward the highway that led out of the city toward the dark line of mountains and the compound I had built and was no longer allowed to enter.
The timer I had felt in the copy room was still running. I just didn't know yet who had started it or who was going to stop it first. I drove home with Marcus Reed's text still open on my phone. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, another message had arrived, this one from Diane herself. "I hope you're taking this opportunity to reflect on what real teamwork looks like. Some people create problems, others solve them. We need solvers at the summit."
No signature, just the words. I read them twice, then locked the screen and sat in the dark car for a full minute before going inside.
The next morning I woke to 3 more notifications. Lena Morales had unfollowed me on the company chat platform. A calendar invite for the final pre-summit briefing had been canceled with the note, "Attendance limited to confirmed participants," and my access to the shared vendor portal had been revoked overnight. When I tried to log in, the screen flashed a single line, "Contact your supervisor for reinstatement." I didn't call Diane. I called the number Marcus had given me the night before.
He answered on the first ring. "Stay home today," he said. No greeting. "I'm looking at the budget files you sent. There are 3 separate line items that were moved after you were removed from the attendee list. One of them routes to a card that isn't in the company system." I kept my voice even. Brandon's name is on the new primary contact for most of the vendors. "I know," Marcus said. "I also know you trained him. That makes this worse, not better."
He paused. I could hear papers shifting on his end. "There's something else. A printed email chain surfaced in the executive printer queue last night. It wasn't addressed to you, but it mentions you by name multiple times. I had it pulled before anyone else saw the full thread. You need to see it." He told me he would have a copy delivered to my apartment by courier within the hour. Then he hung up.
The envelope arrived at 9:17 a.m. I signed for it with hands that stayed steady, even though my pulse was not. Inside were 6 printed pages. The first was the email I had already found. The next 5 were the chain that followed.
Brandon had written to Diane the same night he printed the first message. He said he was worried I might still have copies of the original contracts. He reminded her that the 30% they had moved was supposed to cover incidentals for the nights they planned to stay after the official summit ended. He used the word incidentals 3 times. Then he added one more line.
If she starts talking to the wrong people about the numbers, we both know how fast this turns into something that looks like we were skimming. She trained half the ops team. They still listen to her. We need her quiet before the compound opens. Diane's reply was shorter. Handle it. I already told her she's off the list. If she pushes back, we say she was creating drama and the team felt unsafe. HR will back us. They always do when it's about stability.
I read the pages once, then again. The second time I noticed the date stamps. The chain had continued even after Diane had spoken the 2 lines to my face. They had kept planning how to make me the problem if I asked any more questions. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Brandon.
Hey, just checking in. Diane wants to make sure you're not still holding any of the old vendor logins. We had to reset a couple last night for security. If you have any active ones, can you forward them? We don't want any loose ends before we head to the desert. I didn't answer. I took a screenshot of the message, forwarded it to Marcus with the printed chain, and then blocked Brandon's number.
By noon, the chaos had a rhythm. Every 30 minutes, something new arrived. A vendor I had personally negotiated with called my cell the number I had given them months ago when I set up the account, asking why the second deposit had bounced. Another vendor texted that the welcome gift order had been changed to a cheaper supplier without my approval. Lena sent one final message before she stopped replying altogether. I'm sorry. I can't get in the middle of this.
I sat on my couch with the printed pages spread across the coffee table and watched my phone light up like it was tracking a storm. Each notification felt like another crack forming under the version of my job I had built. At 1:40 p.m., Marcus called again.
I need you to stay exactly where you are, he said. Do not come to the office. Do not answer any calls from Diane or Brandon. I am calling an emergency compliance review on the summit budget. That means everything stops until we sort the numbers. I asked him what would happen if the review found what we both suspected.
Then the people who moved the money will have to explain why they needed a secret account for a company event, he said, and why they decided the person who built the event was suddenly a liability. He didn't say my name. He didn't have to.
After the call, I walked to my kitchen window and looked out at the parking lot. The same cars that had been there every morning for 2 years sat in their usual spots. Nothing outside had changed. Inside my apartment, the printed emails sat on the table like evidence of a fire that had already started and no one had smelled the smoke yet.
I spent the rest of the afternoon making copies. I scanned every page, saved them to a secure drive, and emailed the digital versions to myself and to Marcus. Then I wrote one short message to the only person left on my contact list who still worked at the company and hadn't pulled away yet. Jordan Ellis, the facilities coordinator who had helped me with room blocks in the early planning stages. I kept it simple.
If anyone asks where I am, tell them I'm handling personal matters. And Jordan, if you get asked to sign anything about me or the summit, don't. Not until you talk to Marcus Reed first. She replied 20 minutes later with a single word. Understood. That was the last message I received from anyone at the company that day.
The next morning, the desert compound opened for early setup. I knew because the transportation vendor I had originally booked called my personal cell again. He sounded rushed. Miss Klein, we have a problem. The new contact on file, Brandon Hale, approved a smaller shuttle fleet, but now the headcount on the manifest is bigger than what we have vehicles for, and the second payment still hasn't cleared. If we don't get confirmation by noon, we're going to have to pull the drivers.
I told him to hold the original fleet I had contracted. I told him I would handle the payment confirmation, then I hung up and stared at the phone in my hand. The timer that had started in the copy room was no longer quiet. It was loud enough that even people outside the company could hear it. I opened my laptop and logged into the secure drive where I had saved every original contract. Then I opened a new email to Marcus Reed with the subject line blank. In the body, I typed 3 sentences.
The transportation vendor just called. The payment is still pending under Brandon's name. I still have the original contract with my signature as primary contact. Do you want me to send it? I hit send before I could second guess it. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Marcus. Don't send anything yet, he said. His voice was tighter than it had been the day before. But Avery, be ready to move if I call you again. And whatever you do, do not go to that compound on your own.
I asked him what he wasn't telling me. He was quiet for a beat. There's a second email chain, he said finally. It didn't come through the company server. It came from a personal account. It references nights at the compound that were never on the official schedule. And it names you as the person who might notice if those nights overlapped with budget discrepancies. He didn't say the word affair. He didn't have to. The silence on the line did the work for him.
I looked at the printed pages still spread across my table. The timer in my chest had become a countdown. Marcus spoke again, lower this time. Stay by your phone. And Avery, whatever happens next, it's not going to stay quiet for long. The line went dead.
I sat in my living room with the phone in my hand, in the desert compound less than an hour away, already filling with people who had no idea the ground under their feet had started to shift. The emails on my table felt heavier than paper. The calls from vendors who still trusted my name felt like lifelines I hadn't asked for.
Outside, the afternoon sun hit the parking lot the same way it had every other day. Inside, everything I had spent 2 years building was cracking in real time, and the people who had caused the cracks were already on their way to the one place I had been told I no longer belonged. I didn't know yet who would reach the compound first, the people trying to keep the cracks hidden, or the questions that were finally catching up to them.
But the countdown had reached the part where someone was going to have to answer for the numbers they thought no one would check.
I stayed by the phone like Marcus had asked. The compound was already in motion, shuttles running, staff setting up the welcome packets I had designed months earlier. I didn't need to be there to feel the shift. Vendors kept calling my personal number because the new contacts weren't answering. Jordan Ellis texted once more. People are asking why the original contracts have your name, but the payments are coming from somewhere else. It's getting loud.
At 4:17 p.m., Marcus called again. His voice was calm but final. Get in your car. Drive to the compound. Park in the back service lot. Do not go inside until I text you. The compliance review turned into something bigger. Richard Ellison is on site. He wants to hear directly from the person who built the contracts before anyone else speaks.
I didn't ask questions. I grabbed the printed emails, the scanned files on a flash drive, and drove. The desert roads were empty in that late afternoon light. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, even as my mind ran through every conversation I had ever had with Brandon, every late night I had stayed to help him understand a clause, every time I had vouched for him when someone questioned his numbers. The same person who had called me his work big sister had written that I needed to be made quiet.
I parked where Marcus told me. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Come to the main lodge, side entrance, now. I walked in through the service door. The air inside smelled like the eucalyptus arrangements I had chosen. Laughter from the opening reception drifted down the hall. Marcus met me in a small office just off the main corridor. Richard Ellison, our CEO, stood by the window. Carlos Rivera, the compound's events manager, stood beside him with a clipboard and a worried expression.
Marcus didn't waste time. We pulled the full personal email chain this afternoon, he said. It wasn't on company servers. It came from Diane's private account to Brandon's. It details the budget transfers and the nights they planned to stay here after the official event. It also details how they intended to handle you if you kept asking questions. Richard turned from the window.
They used the company event to cover personal expenses and then tried to sideline the one person who would notice, he said. That's not instability. That's theft and manipulation. He looked at me directly. Avery, I need you to tell me what you know. Start from the beginning.
I laid the printed pages on the table. I explained the months of work, the removal from the attendee list, the vendor calls that kept coming to me,
the access that had been cut. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't add emotion. I simply laid out the timeline and the documents. Carlos Rivera spoke next.
The transportation payment still hasn't cleared under the new name on file. The caterer called me an hour ago asking why the head count and the dietary list suddenly changed without the original contact approving it. People are starting to talk. The leadership team is noticing the gaps. Marcus's phone buzzed. He read the message, then looked up.
Diane and Brandon just arrived at the main lodge. They're expecting to run the welcome session. Richard, if you want this handled before it becomes public gossip among 50 executives, now is the moment.
Richard nodded once. Bring them here. The side door opened 5 minutes later. Diane walked in first, Brandon half a step behind her. She still wore the composed smile she used in every meeting. Brandon looked relaxed until he saw me standing beside Marcus and Richard. His expression flickered. Diane spoke first, voice smooth. Richard, I wasn't expecting a full leadership review this early. We have the welcome session starting in 20 minutes. Avery, I thought we agreed you would take some time for yourself.
Richard didn't return the smile. We're not here for the welcome session. We're here because the compliance review on the summit budget found 3 unauthorized transfers totaling just over $40,000 moved into accounts that trace back to personal cards. We're also here because a private email chain between the two of you discusses using company funds for nights that were never approved, and then removing the original contract holder to keep those discrepancies hidden.
Brandon tried to speak. Diane cut him off with a sharp look, but it was too late. Richard continued. Avery built every contract in this event. She still holds the original signatures. The vendors are calling her because the payments under the new names aren't clearing. The only people who benefit from her being off the property are the two of you. Diane's composure cracked for the first time. She turned to me, voice low and cutting.
You really couldn't let it go, could you? After everything we gave you here, after we let you play at being indispensable. This is exactly why people like you don't get invited to the real table. You create drama instead of solving problems. I met her eyes without flinching. I solved every problem you handed me for 2 years. You decided I was a problem when I started noticing the ones you created. Brandon stepped forward, trying the charm that used to work when he needed help.
Avery, come on! This is getting blown out of proportion. We were just trying to protect the team from unnecessary stress. You know how you get when you dig into details? Marcus spoke for the first time since they entered. The details you're talking about include moving company money to cover personal nights at this compound and then planning to paint Avery as unstable if she asked about it. That's not protecting the team. That's protecting yourselves. Richard looked at Carlos.
Mr. Rivera, how many vendors have already flagged issues with the current payment status?
6, Carlos said. And the transportation company is threatening to pull the remaining shuttles if they don't get confirmation from the original signer by tonight. Richard turned back to Diane and Brandon.
You have 2 choices. You can walk into that welcome session and try to explain to 50 executives why the event they were promised is already short on transportation, food and basic logistics because the people running it decided to play games with the budget. Or you can leave now and we will handle the fallout without you. Diane's face had gone pale under the lodge lights. Brandon looked at the floor. Richard didn't wait for an answer.
Security will escort you both back to your cars. Your access to company systems is suspended effective immediately. HR will be in touch tomorrow about next steps. I suggest you use the drive back to decide how you want to explain this to your teams. They left without another word. The door closed behind them. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Marcus finally spoke.
There's one more thing you need to know, Avery. The personal email chain didn't surface on its own. I flagged the budget anomalies 3 weeks ago when I noticed the new line items. I asked the compliance team to pull everything quietly. When the private chain appeared in the printer queue, it wasn't an accident. I had already requested a full export of Diane's external activity after the first discrepancy. The system caught it. I just made sure it reached the right eyes before anyone could delete it.
He looked at me directly. I knew what they were doing to you. I also knew you were the only one who had kept every original record. I needed you to stay clean, so your evidence would hold when it mattered. The ironic twist landed without fanfare. Marcus Reed, the quiet senior vice president who rarely spoke in meetings, had been building the case the entire time. He had protected the company, and by extension, protected me by keeping me out of the line of fire until the evidence was solid.
Richard cleared his throat. Avery, once this is contained, we're going to need someone to salvage what's left of this summit and run every future event with full authority. That person is you, if you want it. Full budget control, no more middle management interference. Your call.
I looked at the printed pages on the table, then at the door Diane and Brandon had walked through.
I'll stay through the weekend and fix what can be fixed, I said. After that, I'm done working under anyone who treats people the way they did. I'll consult on the events. I won't report to the old structure. Richard nodded once. Done.
The rest of the evening unfolded in controlled chaos. Word spread through the leadership team in quiet conversations. By the time the welcome dinner started, Diane and Brandon's names were no longer on any agenda. Vendors called me directly. I approved the original payments from the contracts I still controlled. The shuttles arrived. The food was served. The sessions ran. People noticed the absences, but the event itself did not collapse.
The social circle that had once included Diane and Brandon simply closed around them. No one defended them. No one asked where they had gone. The same executives who had nodded along in meetings now avoided their names entirely. The affair and the budget manipulation became the story that traveled faster than any official announcement.
I stayed until the final session ended Sunday afternoon. Then I drove back to Scottsdale, turned off my work phone, and didn't turn it on again for 48 hours. When I did, there was only one message from the company. It was from Marcus. Richard made the announcement this morning. Diane and Brandon are no longer with the organization. The board accepted their resignations. Your new consulting agreement is being drafted. Take the time you need. I didn't reply. I didn't need to.
2 weeks later, I signed the consulting contract on my own terms. I kept the relationships with the vendors I had built. I kept the respect of the people who had watched what happened at the compound. I let go of the rest, the late nights, the extra work without credit, the illusion that loyalty to a toxic structure would ever be returned.
I never spoke to Diane or Brandon again. Not a text, not an email, not a single word at any industry event. The professional family I had once tried to hold together by working harder and staying quieter dissolved the moment I stopped feeding it. The quiet I chose afterward was not empty. It was mine.
I still handle events. I still solve problems before most people notice them. But I do it without the weight of people who would rather erase me than face what they took. The freedom did not come with fanfare. It came with the simple decision to stop answering when the old numbers lit up my phone. No contact did not make me cold. It made me clear. Every day I choose not to reopen that door is another day the peace stays mine. Thank you for listening to my story.
Have you ever had to walk away from a work situation where staying would have cost you more than leaving? If you've set boundaries like that, I'd really like to know how it changed things for you.